following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Let's go, baby!
Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Are you ready for a break?
Absolutely.
Ready for a break?
Yeah, and so much for that.
It's time for The Break on DallasCowboys.com.
We were on a break!
With Nick Eatman, David Hellman, Ambar Garcia, and Derek Eagleton.
It is Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, Season 16, Episode number 65. Welcome to the latest edition of The Break. I'm live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. Got Nick, Dave, and Amber joining me today. And we're going to turn the show over to Amber here in just a little bit. We're going to do some fan questions. We don't get to fan questions often enough. So we decided we're going to turn over most of the show today to you guys and let you guys get some questions in, and we'll answer as many as we can and hear what you guys think is important to discuss. We do have a few news items, a few topics we want to hit before we get to that, though. Yesterday we find out that Andy Dalton and Chido Awuzie both were back at practice, according to Coach McCarthy. The expectation is at this point that they will both play this weekend. First, starting with Andy, do you expect to see the offense playing even better than it did versus Pittsburgh with Andy back? Nick, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think I expect that. I think the Cowboys expect that, or they would have, gone to Gilbert. I think that they feel like a little bit better quarterback play would have won that game. I'm sure it would have won the Eagles game as well. And so, as good as Gilbert played based off our expectations, I think that, it could have been way better, obviously. And I think that they're just hoping that Dalton, with a couple of weeks off here, maybe he's fully healthy now, and he can convert some of those field goals into touchdowns. So, yeah, I would think that he could be a little bit better.
Amber.
I think so. There's a possibility of that, but there's just something that I feel that it just doesn't work with Andy Dalton. And I think, obviously, he has all the experience. He's a proven guy. You've seen him do it. You know he can do it. But at the same time, for some reason, and this is just me, I just feel that he just doesn't quite fit in with the guys in the offense. I just feel like there is a lack of connection there and unity in a way. And there's nothing necessarily to back this up. It's merely based on the interviews that I've watched, the guys when they go up there and try to talk to the media, just the way I've heard certain players express themselves about Andy Dalton makes me feel like there is a lack of unity there and a lack of connection. And not to say there's nothing bad, like it's nothing bad against him whatsoever or his skills, but to me personally, I just feel that Garrett Gilbert fits in better, and therefore maybe that's a reason why we saw the offense perform differently than what we saw with Andy Dalton, even though Andy Dalton had a very limited time on the field.
Dave.
Those Andy is Andy quotes really bothered you, huh?
What'd you say?
That was the only thing coming out when Andy Dalton was the starting quarterback was Andy is Andy. He looks the same as he always does, and you're not wrong. It was very boring, but I lean toward thinking Andy Dalton's going to be a pretty drastic improvement, honestly, and I'm banking mainly on the fact that Zach Martin basically was out for both of his starts. He went down early in that Arizona game and missed the Washington game. I think having him there can stabilize that offensive line. And, I think he's the better quarterback. I'll be surprised if he doesn't play significantly better than he did against the Cardinals and Washington.
Yeah, I think that'll be the interesting thing. I'm cautiously optimistic is the way I would put it, because I do think that what I saw from the offense last week was different than what I've seen since Dak has been out. So what I don't know is, like you say, Dave, I don't know if that's because Zach Martin was out and now Zach's back and the offensive line was better because of that, Or was the offensive line better because the quarterback got rid of the ball quicker and was being more decisive with his decisions, getting the ball out, right? So that's where I really don't know. And I think that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on this week, as everything points to the fact that Andy Dalton will be your starter and presumably play the entire game. Let's look at the defensive side of the ball. Cheeto's coming back. You've lost Trayvon Diggs. Do you expect the defense to be better, worse, or the same with basically swapping out Cheeto for Trayvon Diggs? Let's start with you, Dave.
The same. I think you're swapping out one solid corner who occasionally gets beaten for another solid corner who occasionally gets beaten. I think if you had them both, you would probably feel pretty good, but you don't. So it's Cheeto on one side, and then you piece it together with everybody else as you go. So I would guess it's going to look fairly similar, which is to say, okay.
All right, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, you'd like to have them both because I think they would be your two best cornerbacks, especially the two best on the outside. But, Cheeto should be well rested. He also should be aware of certain things, certain looks. Minnesota, they have some good receivers. They got a good young rookie that I know Dave knows all about, but they also, Adam Thielen's a really good route runner, really good player, good pass catcher. So, you'd like to have them both. Probably from an awareness standpoint, I mean, you get more with Cheeto, but, Diggs is a better playmaker. I mean, he's got 2 interceptions, and I think Cheeto has 4 for his career.
Yeah.
For his career.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's he gets about 1 a year. So, and he's got his 1. So I think it's probably going to be about a wash, unfortunately.
Amber.
I agree. I think that we might get a similar look, at least in these first few games of him coming back. I mean, he's missed a really long time. It feels like he's been out since week 2. Then he was out part of training camp because he had suffered another injury at training camp. I forgot what it was, but it was like maybe his knee or something like that. Yeah. And he was out for a little bit. So he's missed a lot of time on the football field. So I have a feeling that it might take him a little while for him to kind of get back on the track and get back to football shape. Although they're not going to put him out there on the field in a real game if he's not ready. But at the same time, I think it's going to take him a couple of games to kind of go back to him being him full self on the field.
All right, let's move to another topic, and I'm going to ask you guys to put on your GM hats a little bit here. Deandre Baker's a guy that's been in the news here recently. He was a guy that was on the New York Giants. He was drafted by the New York Giants. He was charged with armed robbery, and over the last day or two, those charges were all dropped. At the time when he was first charged, the Giants decided to cut him. So he is a free agent. He's sitting out there. Was, I guess by all accounts, and Dave, I'll ask you, since you do the draft show, give me a scouting report on what you guys thought of this guy coming into the NFL.
From what I remember, DeAndre Baker, he's a pure, classic man corner. Georgia used to put him out on an island. He was an elite college player. I don't think he gave up a passing touchdown during either of his seasons as a starter.
Wow.
Average athleticism, he's not a freaky athlete, but he was just a sticky man corner. Giants drafted him 30th. He was one of 3 first-round picks they made that year. And the big thing that I remember being a knock, which is interesting because of what's happened with him over the last 6 months, is his off-field demeanor got a lot of bad marks. People questioning how much he liked football, people questioning his attitude. I think I remember a report last season that he fell asleep during a meeting, that type of stuff. So, I mean, and, you talk about an elite cover corner who played at a program like Georgia, you would think he would be a lot higher than 30th overall, so that probably contributed to it a little bit. And he had a really rough rookie season. Even by rookie cornerback standards, he got picked on a lot last year. So that's kind of the thumbnail, I guess.
With that all being said and understanding where this team is with regards to cornerbacks, we've talked a lot about the fact that they're going to be losing some cornerbacks, presumably, or could lose some cornerbacks this offseason with free agency coming up. Would you, if you were the Cowboys GM, make the decision to give this a shot if you had an opportunity to go in and get this guy? Nick, let's start with you.
Well, if I was the Cowboys GM, I'd be Jerry, and if I'm Jerry, I go and look at it. I mean, Jerry does this is the type of thing that Jerry always does. You're trying to steal players. You're trying to steal talent. They've done it since the moment he got here. If Charles Haley had a little bit of talent left and he could get him for cheap, let's bring him in. Yeah. And it doesn't always work out. Demetrius Underwood, Alonzo Spellman, it doesn't work out all the time. Greg Hardy. I mean, but he's trying to steal talent, and so he's going to look at it. I think you have to. I think they look at the situation. They see, is it worth the headache? And it sounds like in a year it's been a headache enough for the Giants to say, even without even knowing what's going on, the Giants said we're out. So that means to me there's 31 teams available to sign him. I doubt the Giants will be one of them because he'll probably won't want to re-sign them. They turned their back on him before they knew all the information. But they might have known enough to say no thanks. But Jerry will look into it. It doesn't mean he'll sign them. Doesn't mean that they'll get them. But they will always try to acquire talent like this.
Amber, would you kick the tires?
That's a tough one because obviously you always want to get talent, especially at an area of need on your team. But at the same time, I'm someone who doesn't want to deal with behavioral issues and problems outside the field, so I don't want to bring that into the locker room or anything like that. And to me, hearing what the head coach from the Giants said and the fact that they're like, we made the decision that this is what's better for our team, not to have him on there, to me that says a lot because those people know you a lot better than other teams do and people from the outside. And we know, we've seen it. I mean, Nick was talking about Jerry Jones, and we've seen it with Jerry Jones when it comes to certain players. For example, Randy Gregory, very, very, very different story. But when you have guys that you have their backs and you want to root for them and all that, it just to me says a lot that the fact that the Giants decided to turn their backs and say bye. So I would say no. I'll pass on that.
Dave.
I just want to point out two more players real quick, though. Two more players, and Dave might even mention this, but that are on the roster right now, Jordan Lewis and Lyle Collins, both of those guys. The Cowboys did their homework. They said, all right, we see what's in the news, we see what's been reported and all this, but let's do our homework and see. And they brought both of them in, and there hasn't been any issues there. So I'm not saying it's the same thing. Like Amber said, everything's different, but I think the Cowboys will at least do their homework. They have to. They'd be silly not to, and then they'll make their judgment from there.
I would also point out that, you can say the Giants turned their back on him. Maybe they did, but the charges that were alleged were pretty intense. Like, if you go read the police report from over the summer, talking about sticking guns in people's faces and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, it was the type of situation where I don't blame a team for wanting to distance themselves from that. This isn't like cutting a guy over a drug, a marijuana arrest or something like that. So I think that's a little bit different. I don't really think there's a wrong answer to this. Like, kick the tires on a first-round talent. Maybe you steal some player, like Nick said. Or also, if you just feel like it's not worth risking, the influence in the room, that I don't blame you for that either. I lean toward thinking I'd give it a look just because there's really no downside. You bring him in for 7 weeks, see what he can do. If it goes great, that's great. And if it doesn't, you can let him go. So, yeah, I'd probably do it just because I don't.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say here is I look at the Giants, and that actually gives me pause what they did. And the reason why is because if he's a young guy who they drafted high, that they were willing to say at that moment without having all of the facts, or at least all the facts that we know of, were willing to say, hey, we're just going to part ways. It makes me think that maybe his behavior before that corroborated that story enough for them, right? They could see a scenario. Sometimes you hear something that someone did and you're like, doesn't shock me, right? Or you hear something someone did and you're like, oh my God, really? I think this might have fallen in the category maybe for the Giants of, doesn't shock me. And so in that situation, they were like, he's not playing great on the field. Maybe his attitude isn't what we want it to be. We're not shocked by this. We make a move. That's the kind of thing that would make me a little bit leery. But as you mentioned, Nick, like the Cowboys do this. This is what they do. They look at situations where they can steal talent and get it on the cheap. And so I think they certainly should because that's the way they proceed, I think they should at least take a look at this, do their due diligence, which I'm sure they have people who can find out more information about what really happened and find out, what this guy's really all about. And then if they feel like they can bring him in without affecting their locker room, if they think they can bring him in and be a second chance for him, where maybe if his attitude wasn't great in the past, maybe they think it can get better, then do that, because they certainly could use the talent. We all know at the cornerback position, they could definitely use the talent. So I think it would be a good thing for them long term. We're going to go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we're going to jump into fan questions. We're going to get up to a lot of them. Amber has them all lined up for us. We'll do that when we come right back. This is DallasCowboys.com radio.
There's nothing as unique as our eyes, which is why Essilor pioneers ways to make lenses as unique as you. Verilux for super sharp vision, Essential Blue for protection, and Crizal for freedom from glare. 3 cutting-edge solutions in a single unique lens. So whatever your needs, insist on Essilor. Visit your local Essilor experts and find the perfect lens for you. See more, do more, Essilor.
Since 1865, Stetson hats are American-made with pride right here in Texas. And Stetson is proud to be on the field with America's team. Want to show your Texas and team pride too? You can. By purchasing your own Stetson, you can look just like how the flag guys do on field at every home game. Stetson hats, the official crown of all self-respecting Cowboys, and your favorite football team.
Get yours today at shop.dallascowboys.com or at stetson.com.
I'm Jay Novacek, former tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. Back in the day, I was the guy who always got the tough yards, and that's why I run with John Deere today. In fact, I have a John Deere 3025E tractor that can handle any yard work I need to do, even the tough yards way out back. So if you have 1 acre or 1,000, John Deere has the equipment that's just right for you. Visit a John Deere dealer today and run with us. We are the official tractor provider of your Dallas Cowboys.
Dear, it's 1908. Don't you think we should get electricity?
And stop using candles to see at night.
It's just electricity lights up the room fast. It's more reliable than candles blowing out, and people seem to love it nationwide.
Well, candles are...
Dear, did you just run into the wall?
Nope. May I have a new candle, please?
Historically, switching to new technology is a no-brainer. Today, it's AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure, and nationwide. Switch to AT&T 5G. It's not complicated. 5G requires compatible plan. May not be in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
Back to the break.
Give the gift of the Cowboys this holiday season with the ultimate fan experience for the ultimate Cowboys fan. Memberships start at just $20 to join Dallas Cowboys United, presented by Globe Life. Visit dallascowboys.com/united to join today.
Welcome back. It is the second segment of the break. We're live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. We're going to spend the whole rest of the show taking questions from you guys. We want to hear what you guys have to think. Amber has questions lined up. Amber, what you got?
Okay, now that I'm looking at the list of questions, this question, I probably should have given you guys a heads up because I doubt you know this from the back of your head. But yesterday, Derek, you brought up Jeff Heath and what he's doing over there in Vegas. When you start looking at his contract compared to what the Cowboys are losing in guarantees when they decided to cut Clinton Dix, how does that compare? Is there a big amount of money in comparison to what they did with Clinton Dix versus what they could have done with Jeff Heath in trying to keep him here in Dallas?
No, they're not. I mean, they're not that different. I think I can pull it up. Signed for like 1 year, 3.5 with like 2.5 of that guaranteed. Jeff Heath signed a 2-year, $6 million deal, I think. Signed a $4 million deal. Jeff Heath signed a 2-year, $6 million deal. So they're very similar. And when Heath left and signed, people were like, this is a wash or maybe even a downgrade. Like at this point in his career, Clinton Dix is not definitively better than Jeff Heath. I think that's a difference between, a coaching staff. The guys that really loved and knew Jeff Heath aren't here anymore, and the new coaching staff wanted somebody that they were more familiar with or they thought it was a better fit. I'm not trying to hear people act like letting Jeff Heath go was this stupid decision based on how many fans hated him while he was here, though. that's the epitome of hindsight is 2020.
Now, to follow that up, do you guys still think that it was a bad decision from the Cowboys to have decided to cut HaHa Clinton-Dix before the start of the season and even giving him a try to having him on the field?
Well, I mean, when you consider that they brought in Steven Parker up and down from the practice squad, and I mean, I don't know. It's hard for us to say how bad HaHa was. Apparently, the coaches didn't like him at all, and they've let him go. And I don't believe he's in the league anywhere. So, you know, he must have been pretty bad. But I mean, what you've seen out of Darian Thompson and Steven Parker, and you think, well, I'd like to think for the veteran it would click here at some point. So I thought it was a little bit early to do that, especially when you don't have any backups that are playing well. Your starter next to Xavier Woods isn't doing anything really. So I would have probably kept him. But again, it's hard to say. We weren't watching a ton of practice to be able to see what was happening and what wasn't happening.
Yeah, I will say I always thought it was. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
I mean, Nick is right. We didn't get to see a whole lot, but like I remember thinking it was weird. HaHa was a starter for about the first 4 days of practice, and then he was just buried on the depth chart. And I was always like, man, we sure haven't had a whole lot of training camp for y'all to just decide that this guy's not worth a damn right off the bat. Like, it must have been. I mean, he either must have been way more atrocious than I thought, or maybe the fit just wasn't there with the coaches. Maybe they didn't, people talk about, trading Everson Griffin maybe because he didn't mesh with the coaches. Maybe it was a situation like that. I don't know. It sure felt like they abandoned the experiment early, but I'm pretty confident saying, like, I don't think their safety play would be significantly better if he was still here. I think the mistake was not investing more heavily in the offseason, which, I mean, we all know that anyway.
Yeah, I'll say this. The interesting part to me is, and I know in NFL terms, Dave, I think you said that the number was $2 million that was guaranteed on that deal. Obviously, in NFL terms, that's not a ton of money. But for me, I look at it and say, how wrong were they either in the evaluation when they were trying to sign him, or once he got here, how bad did he actually play for them to just say, hey, we'd rather just give you $2 million to leave us, at a position where we don't know what's going to happen. We don't have a clear starter. We don't have players that we feel like are great. To me, that's more of a just kind of a really weird situation where how bad did he have to really play, or how off were they in their evaluations when they signed him to just give him $2 million to walk away? That's the part that really baffles me here. And I don't know that we really know the answer. I think part of it is in the fact that if it's true that he hasn't signed with anyone to this point, then that may tell you a lot, that maybe we made the evaluation, or the Cowboys made the evaluation that was very different than a lot of other teams, and that the other teams are like, there's no way we're taking this guy. And the Cowboys were willing to give him $2 million to just walk away and go sit at home.
Now let's switch the subject over to the quarterback position. I think we all assume that Andy Dalton might be the starter this weekend. Nick, you can start answering this question. What would you say is the length of Dalton's leash, as far as at what point, how many games do the Cowboys give him for them to maybe decide, okay, maybe he's not the right fit, and then maybe we need to let Garrett Gilbert play as the quarterback?
One, if he's terrible. Two, if he's okay, but they lose, and then the second one's not very good either. But if it's terrible in Minnesota, one. But you got to be careful. You got to be careful right now with all that. And the Cowboys have to be prepared for a lot of things going into this. One of them being get Garrett Gilbert ready to play against Washington. And I think it was Chris Beam that pointed this up. Chris, our producer, said, you better get a backup snapper. You better get another quarterback. You better get a backup punter kicker. Because if something happens in this game with the COVID rules, you don't have enough time to get another player for Thursday to bring him in here and all that. So that being said, you better get guys ready to go. I'm giving Dalton one game. If he's not good at all, then I'm going to go to Gilbert. And that's not a very long leash, but that's how close it is for me right now.
Derek or Dave?
Yeah, I think. I mean, if Andy is just absolutely god awful, like just putrid on Sunday, then I think probably one game. Like, I mean, if he just absolutely looks terrible,
maybe quarters, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I guess my point. I'll be pretty surprised if that happens. Like, I'll be pretty surprised if he is awful. So, I mean, I could stand to be corrected, but my guess is as long as he looks decent, I think he's the starter, and as long as Dallas is mathematically alive, if they're trading wins and losses, I think he's the starter the rest of the way. If they lose the next 3 games and they're 2-10, then I think you probably want to look at Garrett Gilbert. So as long as he doesn't look god awful, I think he's the starter as long as they're still technically in the division race. But I mean, if he just looks terrible against Minnesota, then I think you have to change that line of thinking.
Yeah, to be honest with you, if you guys listened to Jerry this morning on the radio, he made it seem as though like that's his guy. Andy is his guy. They brought him in for this purpose exactly. If you had to put a quarterback in, he feels like he has the most experience. He is as Jerry called him this morning, he is a starter. He is a starter caliber quarterback in the NFL. I don't think anybody's saying that necessarily about Garrett Gilbert. So as much as we all may think that, I personally don't think that the Cowboys are thinking that. I think when it comes down to it, unless there is a situation where he is just playing just really horrible football, I think that down for the rest of the season, unless he's injured or unless COVID pops back up, I think Andy Dalton is going to be your starter. And they're going to see how they do with Andy Dalton as a starter because I think they believe in his experience and they want to take advantage of the experience, and that's why they brought him here, is to be able to take advantage of the experience. So he's going to have to be really, really awful in order for them to not play him and go with Garrett Gilbert.
That's funny because you guys keep talking about being awful, and then I'm just here thinking, okay, define awful, because we've seen awful already. So what's the level of awful here?
Cardinals, because, I mean, Washington, such a wash, okay? That was just terrible, the way that whole thing was set up for failure there. And I think you'll see that next Thursday when they play. I think it'll be a much different type game. Zach Martin will help a lot there. The weather, obviously, everything's going to be different. But Arizona, it wasn't all his fault. He didn't get a lot of help. He got some drop passes, but he wasn't that great either. And they only had 3 points until everybody went to bed, and then they scored another touchdown. So I think that's kind of borderline here. You're playing about an equal type team. Minnesota, Arizona's better than Minnesota, but they're about close to equal. And if he doesn't play well, he has a field goal through most of the game. That's pretty awful for me.
See, I think I hear you. I'm not saying Andy was good against Arizona, but just looking at it, he completed 63% for 266. Led them on a couple of scoring drives. Again, not saying they played great. They got their asses kicked. But if he can do that, I think he stays in. It's more like if he's posting a line like Ben DiNucci did in Philly, or Carson Wentz in Philly, where you're struggling to even approach 200 yards passing, 4 yards per attempt, something terrible like that, that's where I think you have to make a change. But he at least looked like a competent quarterback against Arizona, so I think he would have to be worse than that to get pulled.
Yeah, I think honestly it's going to come down to turnovers, and it's going to come down to missing opportunities. So if regularly the coaches are saying this guy is open, he missed the read, he didn't get the ball there, he missed the throw, or I should say, he's turning the ball over. If he's throwing interceptions, if he's getting sack fumbles where he's just giving the ball away, I think those are two things that I think would quickly define for them that he's playing poorly. And if you get to that situation, then I think maybe they make a move. We heard Mike McCarthy talk about how one of the keys for him right now with this team is trying to solve the turnover issue. So if he takes it back to where they were a few weeks ago, where they're turning the ball over at this crazy rate, and he's doing 2 or 3 turnovers a game, then I think that could get him pulled. Do you have something?
All right, well, let's take our final.
No.
Okay, I thought you had something. Go ahead.
Sorry, I can't say Nick on my screen, so I didn't know if he was about to talk or not.
I mean, I always have something, but I mean, I'll just let me throw this part in. If it's not that great, do you get an advantage by starting Gilbert against Washington? Now, Washington hasn't seen him. They've prepared for Dalton, and it went well for them. Gilbert would give them maybe a new look. You only have a short amount of time to do that. But I'm just saying, if it's not that great, we know how it is on Thanksgiving. There's always a spark. There's always something. It would be a similar type atmosphere maybe to the Pittsburgh game, even though you'd have more home fans, I'm sure. But I'm just saying, it's that festive feeling. I think Gilbert, if it's not good, if they lose and they lose in a bad way against Minnesota, I think I could see that switch, and it might give him an advantage because Washington hasn't prepared for him yet.
I guess we'll see what happens pretty soon. Let's go ahead and take our final break, and we have plenty more questions to get to when we come back after this break.
We're back with a tasty treat that's sweeping airwaves and taste buds. It's new Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda. Let's take a listen.
Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda's here. A new combo that's music to my ears, okay. Let's play. Cream Soda and Dr. Pepper time. Pour it in a glass of ice.
Music to my ears and mouth. New Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda.
A delicious duet.
There's nothing as unique as our eyes, which is why Essilor pioneers ways to make lenses as unique as you. Verilux for super sharp vision, Essential Blue for protection, and Crizal for freedom from glare. 3 cutting-edge solutions in a single unique lens. So whatever your needs, insist on Essilor. Visit your local Essilor experts and find the perfect lens for you. See more, do more, Essilor.
The Cowboys way, where 16 Hall of Famers and 5 championships shows us what success looks like. Where turkey is always the second best part of Thanksgiving Day. Where we are all defined by one single thing, the star. Where we as fans know it's our job to keep the tradition going. Bank of America is proud to be the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys and to support the quest of living life the Cowboys way.
Copyright 2020, Bank of America Corporation.
Dear, it's 1908. Don't you think we should get electricity?
And stop using candles to see at night.
It's just electricity lights up the room fast. It's more reliable than candles blowing out, and people seem to love it nationwide.
Well, candles are...
Dear, did you just run into the wall?
Nope. May I have a new candle, please?
Historically, switching to new technology is a no-brainer. Today, it's AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure, and nationwide. Switch to AT&T 5G. It's not complicated. 5G requires compatible plan. May not be in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
Back to the break.
The 2020 PBR Unleash the Beast World Finals will be at AT&T Stadium this Thursday through Sunday. Don't miss a second of the action. Get your tickets now at pbr.com or SeatGeek.com.
Welcome back. We are in the final segment of the show. Amber's taking questions from the fans, and we're going to jump right back in. What you got, Amber?
Thank you, Derek. I have a long question, so bear with me and be patient. We keep talking a lot about the draft and all that, so here's a draft question, basically. If the Cowboys finished with the worst record in the NFL, is there any chance that they decide to draft a quarterback or Trevor Lawrence and let Dak hit free agency in order for them to be able to take advantage of the lower cap number and therefore be able to shore up on defense and fix the issues on the O-line? So basically to save money so they can fix other issues around the team.
This is going to be the debate that doesn't go away as long as the Cowboys are in the top 5 of the draft order, which we'll see, obviously we'll see how that pans out. It's a very interesting topic of conversation because you're taking a hell of a risk that any rookie quarterback is ever going to be better than what we've seen from Dak Prescott. Having said that, Trevor Lawrence is probably, and honestly, I think the world of Justin Fields too. I think those are maybe the best pair of quarterback prospects that have come out since Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin were at the top of the draft in 2012. And to be blunt, I don't think the Cowboys would be doing their jobs correctly as a front office if they didn't at least consider it. But I also, 1, I don't think they're going to be drafting in the top 2. And 2, I think Dak Prescott is that good that it's probably not worth the risk of letting him walk. So I don't think you're crazy for asking the question, but I don't think it's going to happen either.
I think the Cowboys. I agree with it. I agree with that. With what Dave said. I don't think they will be drafting right up there, but close enough to at least talk about it. I mean, think about last year. This point last year, everyone was saying the Dolphins or other teams might tank for Tua. Well, Tua ends up 5th, right, or 5th or 6th. So he fell a little bit. So I'm not saying Lawrence is going to fall, but I'm saying we don't really know how everything's going to always shake out. But I think the Cowboys need to do their homework and evaluate these quarterbacks. And if Trevor Lawrence is the number one quarterback, number one player on the board, and all of that, and he's one of the best they've seen in all this time, then yeah, I think you have to consider that because yes, he's a rookie quarterback, but you put him in. This team was designed to be that way. I mean, they brought in a rookie quarterback and he had success because of how it was built. Now it's not built that way now, but it can get rebuilt that way if you had an extra $31 million sitting around like you do this year. So I think you have to consider it. I mean, if you're up there and Trevor Lawrence is definitely the guy that they think is one of the best quarterbacks that has come out in recent years.
I'll point out a couple things on this. The first thing is when they brought in Dak, obviously they didn't expect Dak to be what Dak became. But what made Dak so successful initially as a young quarterback was the fact that he had a great offensive line. And I'm not certain how much stock I put in this offensive line going into next year. I think they got some good parts. I think they got some really good players. I just don't know what the health situation will be for some of them. And so I don't know where the offensive line stands. But that all being said, the way I look at this is if you're in the top 2, there is going to be a ransom to be paid by a lot of teams who are looking for quarterbacks to get into those top 2. So you can look at it 2 different ways. Amber, you looked at it from the standpoint of, do you restart the clock essentially on the rookie quarterback and have those years where you don't have to worry about paying a quarterback and invest those resources in the defense? I'll look at another way of, do you want to trade back, get like I said, a ransom of picks from a team that's willing to jump up or that wants to jump up to be able to get a shot at one of those 2 quarterbacks and then use those picks in order to restart your defense? That's the way I would prefer to do it because I'm a bird in the hand kind of guy. If I've already got a quarterback, I don't know that I'm trying to go back to the well. Even if I think I might marginally get better at quarterback, I think I got a quarterback that's good enough to win championships with. So for me, I say if you get to the top 2, you trade back, you get more picks, you use those picks to reinfuse into your defense, maybe an offensive lineman, and you see where you go from there. I'm all in on Dak. I stick with Dak. I don't change that up.
Now I should know this by heart. Based on me covering this team in the NFL for like 6 years, but I forget dates and all of that every single year. So when you look at free agency and the draft and all that, draft is in late April, I believe, and which decision do you need to make first? Either figure out what you're going to do with Dak or wait until the draft to see if you get a chance to possibly draft a quarterback.
You have to tag Dak by sometime in February. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it's the same every year. The deadline to use the franchise tag is usually 2 weeks to a month before the start of free agency. I've been saying that forever. That's why the Cowboys need this money. That's why they're not using it. Is like they have to tag Dak. Like the odds of them getting a deal done between the end of the season and the start of free agency, it's not impossible. It's also not very likely. That does not happen very often because players want to hit the market. They don't want to do the hard work for the team. They want to see what they can get offered. So Dak will need to be tagged by February. I would tag him like the day after the season ends just to get it out of the way. And then you go from there. You don't have to sign him long term. You can keep him on the tag and see what happens, whether that's draft capital or potential trades and all that stuff. But he's going to need to be tagged very soon after the season ends.
Hey, Dave, I have a question for you on that. Do you believe the reports that were out there that this last offseason that on the actual final day to actually do a long-term deal, that the Cowboys and Dak's people were getting closer and they basically ran out of time. Do you put any stock in those reports? Because the reason why I asked that is if you put stock in those reports, maybe they're ready to do a deal once the new season opens and they say, hey, you can sign your guys. Maybe they're ready to do a deal if they were getting close at that point and they still feel the same way about one another.
I believe that they started talking, I don't think it was dramatic. I don't think that they were trying to get the signatures on the paper and they ran out of time. I think they probably, I buy that they talked and they maybe made some progress, but if you were close enough to the point where it might have gotten signed, it would have gotten signed. So I don't completely buy that. And like I said, it's definitely possible. Maybe Dak's injury changes some things as well. Maybe Dak would agree to a deal that he wouldn't have before because of what's going on with his ankle. I tend to doubt that. That's just a guess on my part from what I know about Dak. So I don't view this as being any different than it was the rehab and everything.
All right. Were you gonna say something, Nick?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll just pose this question to you first. You, Derek, you brought up the whole current O-line situation. So going back to that and what the Cowboys currently have there and the issues that we've seen, based on that group, starters and backups, how viable does it look for 2021? How much resources are you thinking that the Cowboys are going to have to put into the O-line this upcoming year?
Yeah, I do think that they're going to have to address that. And the sad part is that they have been addressing it. I mean, maybe not at tackle, but they've continued to do that. I mean, Connor McGovern was just a pick in the third round because he had high value, and they said, we'll need to use him at some point, and they've addressed it with Connor Williams, the year before, and Tyler Biotish this year, fifth round. But they have addressed it. I think they have to address the tackle position one way or another. Get solid backup in here or future guy, or maybe you draft a guy. I know that there's some talk there. Dave would know this on the draft show. I guess the guy from Oregon that's opting out, who could be a clear-cut tackle at some point, could start off at guard the way Lyle did, or Flozell Adams, or whatever. Maybe put him in at guard until he's really ready to play tackle. So there's options there, but I think you do need to address it even more now.
It's funny because I feel like sort of a sunshine pumper when we talk about the offensive line, because I do agree you do need to address it. They need a better swing tackle, and whether that's in the draft, probably needs to be in the draft, because like we've talked about, signing one in free agency would be very expensive. But Lyle Collins is 27 years old. I feel optimistic that he's going to be just fine when he's had a chance to rehab his surgery. And Tyron Smith, unless he's retired, I don't mean this to sound mean, but you're kind of stuck with him. They just restructured his deal. They pushed his money back to make room for Dak's contract. So they can't cut him or anything or trade him without it being, this crazy hit on their salary cap. So I would imagine you're going to rehab him and hope that him having surgery means he'll be okay. And then between, you still have Connor Williams, you still have Connor McGovern, you still have Zach Martin, and you have Tyler Biotish. That seems pretty nice on the interior. So really, we're just talking about needing a third tackle. Yeah. And whether, if they want to draft Penei Sewell, I think that's how you say his name, that's the Oregon guy, that seems awfully dramatic to me, drafting a swing tackle in the top 10. And I get that he could be your starter in the future, but that still feels really dramatic. But if he's the best player available, go for it. But either way, sometime in the first 3 rounds of the draft, they probably need to draft a tackle.
Yeah, my question would be, if you were going after that Oregon tackle, can he play guard? Because if he can play guard, then that spans you, right? That gives you an opportunity to get him on the field because he'll be one of your best 5, and he'll take Connor's spot there at guard. And maybe Connor becomes your swing tackle, or he's your swing tackle in the event of long-term injury. And then at whatever point they move on from Tyron, or Tyron retires, then you just slide him right in and he's ready to roll. So I think, I wouldn't completely push that idea out of mind if he can play guard. But you're right. If he's not going to play guard, then taking a top 10 pick and having him a guy that's going to be on the sideline with all the problems you got on this team, like that's a bad idea, I think, right now.
Here's a final question going into what you just said, Derek. You know, we keep talking about these O linemen that have the flexibility, and we're always questioning, is he going to play tackle, or is he going to be a guard, or maybe center, or whatever. I mean, when you're looking to address whatever position on the O-line, are you still wanting a guy that has that kind of flexibility to be moved around the line, or are you looking more for someone that's more stuck at a certain position that you know it's going to be there, that maybe has more experience at, let's say, tackle, for example, versus to someone that's like, you're still, where are we going to place him, guard or tackle? So which way would you go? Someone that's strictly more a one position, or someone that still has that kind of flexibility?
I'll answer that because I think that's a very good question, and it's very good. It changes based off of where you're picking. I can think of two examples. One of them played for the Cowboys, but two examples where players were drafted very high because they were supposed to be great players. So you have to play them at left tackle. But it turns out they weren't very good there. They were better at guard. Robert Gallery was one. I think he was picked 2 overall by the Raiders. And Leonard Davis, picked by the Cardinals, eventually went to the Cowboys. You're not going to draft a guard at number 2. At least you didn't back then. But they drafted him at tackle. They played him there. You know, we see it in the NBA all the time, too. These guys that are drafted 10th, 11th overall, they're not that great until they go to the next team, and they're a role player, and that's what they're better at. So it's a tricky part. If you get those guys in the second and third round, I think that's where you love to have the flexibility. They can play different spots for you. They'll be great backups for you. But if you draft them high, I mean, position flex is one, but I'd rather have a stud at one spot and say this is where he's going to play.
I will say this, too. Typically, when you're drafting that high, the ability of those guys, the athletic ability of those guys, typically means they do have position flexibility. It's kind of like Zach Martin, right? Yeah. Zach Martin is a great player. You can move him to other spots. Now, they're going to keep him at guard, and they've kept him at guard, and they've only had him play a tackle in emergency situations. But I have no doubt that Zach Martin is such a talented player that you could probably put him anywhere on the offensive line, and he'd be at least okay, if not great, right? So I think when you're drafting that high, I think it would be, in most instances, the guys probably can do a little different things. Those are interesting names that you brought up, Nick. We have seen that happen from time to time where guys get drafted high to play tackle because that's what you need to. That's where you need to put them if you're going to use that much draft capital. But you find out later they're better guards, and I think that happens from time to time. But again, I think with this whole situation and just in general, I think it is a general good principle that a player is more valuable if he has position flexibility, because that does allow you to be the ability to move him if you need to.
And Dave, you'll know this. It seems like teams are willing to draft guards a little bit higher, especially if there's a clear cut. I know Quentin Nelson was one, but it seems like there's been others that you could draft if you've got a stud there. You're not afraid to take guard that high.
No, I mean, I think Zach Martin deserves a lot of credit for that. I mean, I know 16th overall is not like crazy high, but Brandon Scherf is another one in Washington. Quentin Nelson's probably the best offensive line prospect that's come out in the last 5 years. Yeah, I mean, people see the value in that a lot more than they used to. Like, it used to be a thing of, guard's not somewhere you need to draft in the first round, but we know better than most that a really top-notch one can make a world of difference. So it's, I don't bat an eyelash at this point when guards go in the top 10. And if that's the best option, yeah, by all means.
Let me throw one more point out before we end the show. I know there's so much talk. You can't go anywhere without people saying they should tank, they should get a high draft pick and all this kind of stuff. But if they do get into the playoffs and they say you're sitting at 18 or so, this team has so many needs that you can still get value throughout the draft. I mean, what if safety is in the middle of the first round and you take a guy there? You need one for sure. You need two actually. A guard, you could maybe justify that if he had some position flex. If you're sitting there around 18 or so, maybe tight end. I think they're okay with Jarwin. I'm just talking about positions that typically don't go super high, but you're sitting there, you're going to need everything. Defensive tackle, you need everything. So I'm not too worried about it. If you sneak into the playoffs and build camaraderie there, you still have some opportunities to get a good player at anywhere really in the first round because you need so much.
I don't completely disagree with you. I mean, if there's one thing where Cowboy fans, if there's one thing that you can trust this team to do for the most part, it's draft well. And I know they picked Taco over TJ Watt, but their track record over the last decade speaks for itself in terms of finding talent. I think the thing when you're talking about tanking the season, it's not so much the first round pick. It's that you're picking at the top of every other round. So let's say if you're picking, just like 2016, if you're picking fourth overall, that also means you're picking 35, you're picking 65. And so now if you view the top 100 as guys that are instant difference makers, you've got a chance to draft as many as 4 guys that can compete for starting time right away. I think that's what makes that's what makes it so exciting, more so than having that top 10 pick, in my opinion.
And I think the other thing to consider there, too, is, and we won't know this until we get a little deeper into the draft, and by the way, we're going to be starting the draft show this year in December, but the other thing to consider there is how deep are each of these positions where the Cowboys need help, right? Because if you've got a position that is top-heavy, and let's say, for example, it's the safety position and it's top-heavy, I'm not saying it is, but if it is, and you're drafting later, now your opportunities to be able to get one in the first round or in any subsequent round is diminished because of the fact that it's not as deep of a position. So I think we got to figure out, too, what's the depth at each of these positions? How much talent is going to be there? And are there opportunities to get really talented players in the second, third, fourth round and later in those second, third, fourth rounds? So we appreciate you guys joining us. Go ahead, Nick. No, go ahead, Nick.
I'm just saying, we'll talk about this throughout the last 7 weeks. We will talk about this a lot, about tanking and all this stuff. But it's just for media. It's not for, and maybe some late or not, just kind of blasé fans, really. But it's not for the team, and it's not for diehard fans. It's just something that you wish they would get. It would be nice to have it, but there's no way to go about it. You don't play for it. You don't go out and play your games that way. So, you know what I mean? That's why talking about the draft and stuff this early is, I think sometimes it could be pointless because you don't know what you're going to get. And the team is going to go out to try to win. They're not going to try to play for it. It's just media that say, I don't have a dog in the fight, that just want a high draft pick.
Well, not to get us too far into discussion, I don't think it's – I think there are some diehard fans out there that would prefer the Cowboys to have a higher pick than – yes, Nick, you can't speak for all of them. You can't speak for all of them. You can't speak for
a higher pick. Prefer a higher pick.
Yes.
Prefer a higher pick. Yes.
And what I mean by that is,
but not to lose to Washington.
Okay. What I'm saying is,
not to lose.
I don't think either one of us. I don't think either one of us can speak for every fan out there. And I think there are some diehard fans that would probably call into this show or text this show, and I've seen them on Twitter, that would say that they prefer that the Cowboys don't necessarily win. They love what they saw last week, which is a competitive team that plays hard and still ends up with a loss. At the end of the day, what they really want is that top-notch pick because they think that has more value than the possibility of getting into the playoffs and losing in the first round.
That's fine. That's not a diehard. I'm talking about the diehards, not talking about fans that are fans of the team. I'm talking about the ones that die hard. Trust me, I have a college football team. I don't want them to lose, ever.
Yeah, that's because you don't get draft picks.
I'm not losing.
Yeah.
And they're really bad.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Why didn't we start this conversation 15 minutes ago?
We need another 30 minutes to do this.
We have a show to end.
We really need 30 minutes.
I got a lot to say.
Derek, end the show. End the show.
All right, tell you what.
That's fine. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about it.
We will.
But they're just not diehards. That's all I'm saying. They're not diehards if you want them to go and lose to that game.
Okay.
They didn't like the Steelers game.
Here's what we're going to do.
Your mentions are going to be interesting.
I know. Here's what we're going to do.
Here's what we're going to do. To see.
And that's not really any different than any other day. And Nick just mutes them and says, leave me alone.
No.
But the point is.
I don't care. They will not say, I want them to lose and I'm a diehard. Doesn't happen.
Okay.
Doesn't happen.
Here's what we're gonna do. I do think
it doesn't.
I do think
you're not a diehard.
I do think
because you're getting diehard.
I do think this is a conversation that we can pick back up, and maybe we'll pick it up on Friday as a topic in one of our segments. Friday, we'll pick it up and talk a little bit more about it. Until then, though, for Nick Eatman, Dave Hellman, Amber Garcia, I am Derek Eagleton. This has been The Break, live on DallasCowboys.com radio.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys?